Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. This is CMG TALK. This is Catherine Gallagher. Thanks for joining me. Today I'd like to talk about masking. Masking is where you're not presenting your true authentic self. And it can be about situational or contextual reasons. It might be under duress, stress. You might suppress or hide who you really are to fit in. It could also be under circumstances where you feel that it may be under bullying. It might be to be able to present the best version of you for an interview. It might be you're in a relationship situation and you are masking your true feelings. Some people present the best version of themselves initially in a relationship, and then I hear people saying to me, I didn't see this side of this person. They were masking the rage, the jealousy, the controlling. How did I not see this side of them? They were masking those behaviours, those thoughts, those feelings. Some people mask certain thoughts, certain feelings because they're not socially acceptable. It might be to do with abuse, emotional, physical, sexual abuse. It might be to do with bullying. It might be because we're withholding certain things because we want to be accepted. And there might also be situations, for instance, where people have neurodiversity. Autistic people who mask are more, they often show more signs of anxiety, depression. Because they're trying to be and present in a particular way to be accepted. Sometimes people will talk about masking in social situations. A first date. Any date, right? And if we also think about in social, cultural norms, identifying ethnicities where people mask, especially if you're in one culture and you move to another culture, you might mask certain attitudes and behaviours because they're not acceptable. Sometimes people mask thoughts, ideas, ideologies, and only ever maybe disclose under certain circumstances, under closed doors. If you think about recent examples of masking and look at behaviours that we've become aware of, they've come into the public eye, we might hear that masking might be within governments and policies. It might be that masking have become clear to do with individuals, with their behaviours. We might hear masking has become aware of with to do with personalities. We thought they were one person and suddenly we are now aware and been made aware that this person is not all we thought they were. In fact, they're completely different. How many times do we meet someone, have somebody around us and suddenly we see a very different side to them? Have they been masking? We know that when someone is not showing the true side to themselves, that it can lead to anxiety and stress and depression. But some things that people hide, they're hiding things for a reason. And for them, it's a very good reason. Sometimes people hide things because they want to feel safe. They're protecting themselves. They want to avoid stigma, mistreatment, bullying. They want to be successful in work. They want to attract a romantic partner. They want to feel included and involved. They want to avoid loneliness. They want to get the same treatment. Sometimes people mask because they know what their thoughts and feelings are, and what their behaviours and attitudes are just totally unacceptable, inappropriate, and not something society would ever see as acceptable. And some people have things that they mask because it's seen as out of the ordinary, or maybe seen as extreme. Masking, a concept that people often aren't quite aware of. They're not quite sure. It's not maybe a term that they normally would have in the vocabulary, but when you introduce it or talk about it, they go, that's what that is. Now I understand that that's what they're doing. They're masking. They're masking. And sometimes people will say, what does it really mean, masking? How does it really affect you? Well, often people say if somebody's masking and they're not being their authentic self, do you feel a disconnect? Do you feel can you really ever really get to know someone? Sometimes people talk about, I feel I have been duped. I feel that this person hasn't really let me see who they truly are. I have let my guard down. I have allowed myself to get to know this person. Now I see a very different side to them because they've been masking. Sometimes people mask for self-interest. And when we want to fully engage and we want to be accepted and we want to be taken as who we are, providing we're not masking something that's sinister, masking something that's unhealthy, if we allow ourselves to be accepted for who we are, that means being vulnerable, trusting, and knowing we're not going to be judged. But as I said earlier, some people mask. In their eyes, they're masking for a good reason, because they know that they will be judged. They know that it will be unacceptable, and they know that what they're doing is not appropriate. Some people, it takes time for them to understand and to name, this is masking, this is toxic, this is not acceptable. And until they draw a line, assess and accept that this is a boundary, this is crossing boundaries, this is not acceptable, and their tolerance is no longer there. They say, this behaviour is masking behaviour that I'm not prepared to have. Unless we own and put accountability and responsibility and ownership to behaviours that are no longer or have never been, but we now see we will not accept. Whether it's bullying, abuse, emotional, physical, psychological. It's all about being our authentic self, ideally, isn't it? But it's also knowing our own worth, our own value, what is and what isn't okay. So if we're masking, what's the reason for masking? If we've been the recipient of somebody who's a loved one, a close person to us, whether it's in a work or a personal life, and we discover or we know that someone's masking, ask yourself where this is for you. until we review and assess behaviours and how we feel about the words, the actions, the feelings, the emotions. Understanding masking and understanding where you stand with it, what you want to have happen. Because concealing, being deceptive, hiding emotions, behaviours, masking is usually concealing a negative emotion, sadness, frustration, anger, and then putting a positive emotion on that. Camouflaging, faking it. How fulfilling. But if you look at the natural personality behaviour and to conform to social pressures, abuse or harassment, if you look at masking and the outcome or desired outcome of masking and the purpose of masking, it is to hide your authentic self in an effort to gain greater social acceptance. But you have to ask yourself, acceptance from who? Of who? And at what cost to you? Because if we're having to mask who we are authentically, and if what we're masking is a healthy part of ourselves, ask ourselves, to what end? If we are around the right people, good people, people that help us to be the best version of ourselves, masking shouldn't have to be present. Of course, sometimes I talk to people that are in jobs, nursing, paramedics, doctors, caregivers, and they're often told to mask their emotions. As a therapist, I'm expected not to get over emotional. If I fall apart, I'm no good to my clients. Let's put it that way. Masking comes in different shapes and different forms. There's different levels and different types of masking. If you're at an interview and you're masking and putting on the best foot forward, you're putting the best version of you, providing you're not presenting a completely different person. It is you, but it's your best version of you. You're not lying about who you are. Have you ever been in a situation where someone at an interview gives a completely different version of who they are, says that they can do all these wonderful and amazing things, and then at the end of it, it comes about that they can't? Because it never comes good if you're presenting things that are downright lies. They're not truthful. Okay. And it ends up causing, as we talked earlier, stress and anxiety. And eventually it can lead to suicidal ideations, the pressure and duress. So the question is, Is masking ever required? Maybe with some of those examples you might say, is it not human? Sometimes, is it not understandable if somebody's doing it to protect themselves for safety reasons? But what if somebody's masking who they truly are, their behaviours, their emotions, their feelings, their thoughts, when they are toxic, sinister? Is that ever okay? And do you ever know if somebody's masking? Does the mask ever slip? People sometimes are caught off guard. It's called seepage, where sometimes people, they present a particular side. Oh, they're very amenable and very charming and everything's okay. And then maybe under pressure and duress, the mask slips. Maybe they're known in the public eye to be a particular way, and then suddenly the mask slips. Maybe interview, you project and perform and you deliver and you present yourself in a particular way. And then throughout time, you might get the job and then they might discover that you can't play the flute at level 3 after all, because you go to a works night out and somebody says, hey, I've got a flute here, do you want to play it? Because I know that you're an expert at flute playing. Somebody that had said they can play the guitar, and somebody had a guitar with them and handed them the guitar. They couldn't play the guitar. And it didn't bode well, because the person that asked them to play the guitar was an expert in the guitar and happened to be the head of the company. That did not go down very well. Equally, somebody had said they could speak Chinese, Mandarin and Japanese, right? And couldn't speak any. And they had somebody speaking to them in Mandarin and they couldn't speak any foreign languages. You have to be careful sometimes what you're masking. Equally, sometimes people do mask because they're trying to protect. They're trying to be sensitive. They don't want to over-disclose. They don't want to share. They don't want to upset other people. You know, I know you're upset, so I don't want to get upset because that's going to make things worse for you. So I'm trying to protect, be sensitive. There's different levels of masking. If we understand the concept of masking and what it does and what it means psychologically, when we're hiding the true, authentic self, if we're in a relationship that's toxic and we understand that these behaviours are about masking, sometimes then it helps us to understand and name it, to know what to do about it. If you're with someone and they seem very, compassionate and empathic, and then we realise that actually they're not. They've just learned to live at that level to fake it, but they're not really that person. Maybe they're insecure and jealous, and maybe actually very controlling. Understanding that actually what you were seeing wasn't really who they were. Sometimes I hear that. I hear people say to me, I don't get it. I'm just waiting for that person to come back. I really thought they were that caring and empathic and kind person. I don't understand. Surely that person must still be there, but maybe they were masking. Maybe what you're seeing is actually the real authentic person. Understanding the concept of masking can in itself help us to regain a sense of control. Nobody likes to be duped. Nobody likes to know that somebody at some level has been masking at a level where we feel we've been taken in. If we're scammed, or where it's been harmful and toxic for ourselves. And in a mental health capacity, masking can be very problematic. Although masked depression isn't used in a diagnostic way, it is used in a way of understanding behaviours. And it's very much still in the research stage. And often the cause of it and why it happens is very much subjective and is still being very much looked into and explored. We can surmise and guess why people do it. And often people will share sometimes why they do it. And sometimes we feel that the reasons are explicable. But when it happens to us or around us, and it impacts us in a detrimental way, it's understanding what is going on that can make it easier to make sense of. It's the not knowing that's often the most difficult thing to deal with, isn't it? So there's lots I could talk about around masking. This is just a glimpse and insight, and it's not an in-depth by any manner of means. And as I say, it's very much researched and being researched at the moment, and there's a lot still to be learned about masking. But I just thought it would be something, given what's going on and a lot of the behaviours that we're seeing and hearing about. I think it's important to understand that masking exists. Thanks for listening. Take good care. All the best and have a great rest of your Monday. Bye for now.